Nostradamus, what news from the future?
Please, go away. I am really busy.
You have made no prophecies for many weeks.
Yeah, actually, I'm pretty involved in this canal project. I'm investing with this guy who wants to irrigate the driest part of France, and prophecies feel so 1537, you know?
Just one. The people crave it.
Okay, let's see. When the numbers of the year add up to 19, and the last number of the year is 7, the moon will cover the sun, and a mad king, an orange idiot, will spill rivers of blood across a great land. There, you happy? Now beat it. I have to look at these canal specs.
Isn't it supposed to be in rhymed quatrains?
I don't do that stuff anymore.
Please?
Okay, fine. Tell those minstrels in the street to come in here. Minstrels, break it down. Haters gonna hate, players gonna play. I'm telling you, the sun will get dark someday when the air gets lumpy and the ocean's a dump. The king is a Humpty Hump named Trump. How do I know that in 1550? My brain is big and my mind is shifty. Holla back now, you doubting Thomas. Give it straight up for Nostradamus, give it up. Canals of the future, baby. Give it up. Irrigation, shoddy. Give it up.
Could you stop that, please?
Take 5, minstrels.
I don't know. That seemed to be mostly about you. I was really interested in the sun getting dark part.
That? That's just an eclipse. They happen all the time. People get way too worked up about them. What is it with people and eclipses? Why aren't they more interested in, canals? But someday I predict there will be a moron who will talk for 49 minutes and 30 seconds about a basic eclipse. And his name will be Colin McTimberlake. Holla back, 21st century. How close was I? Nostradamus, posthumously conscious, holding a caucus on the way we use water. Give it up.
All right, so that's Nostradamus on the subject of the eclipse. But we are going to be talking a little bit more scientifically, most of the time anyway, about the eclipse. But that's the thing. Okay, so eclipses have been around for as long as the Earth has been around. In fact, I read in a piece by geophysicist Robert Thorson today that in the early days of the moon, I'm talking billions of years ago, the moon was 3 times closer to Earth than it is now. So eclipses were really big then. There was nobody there to see them, obviously, but they were a big deal. But just for example, by 715, Edmund Halley, the guy that you associate with the comet, was able to predict with some precision when the moon's shadow would pass over England and exactly where in England the shadow was going to pass. He wrote at the time, "They will see that there is nothing in it more than natural and no more than the necessary result of the motions of the sun and moon." So in other words, no big no big superstitious thing. No, it was a scientific event as far as Halley was concerned. And as far as we're concerned, except that I don't think we ever shake off our sense of wonder and maybe our sense that, wow, maybe something else is going on here. This is not the way things are supposed to be here in the middle of the afternoon. And that's probably the way some of us are going to feel on Monday. So we've decided to explore that today with some terrific guests. Before I introduce them, I want to mention also that we are offering this show in what we call Radio for the Deaf. It's a format that goes up onto the Colin McEnroe Show page of Facebook. We have wonderful American Sign Language interpreters here. They will interpret the entire show simultaneously, and that feed will be available to a deaf audience on Facebook Live. So if you know anybody who fits that description, who might benefit from that, it'll stay up there. But if they want to experience the show live for whatever reason, starting right now, it's happening. And we'll tell you more about our wonderful interpreters as we go along here. And as long as I'm talking about accessibility, okay, here's another part of this. Something called ACB Radio, a project of the American Council for the Blind, is going to stream live coverage of the eclipse on Monday with a trained audio describer describing the eclipse for the visually impaired. We're going to have a link to that on our website so that you can tell people that you know who might fit that description, might be interested in that. So between 1 and 2 p.m. CDT on Monday, Dr. Joel Snyder will host a total eclipse audio described on ACB Radio. All right, that's all the accessibility issues for now. Now we have to move on to the actual eclipse itself. Joining us here in the first segment, we're going to talk to John Dvorak, geophysicist, astronomer, and author of Mask of the Sun, The Science, History, and Forgotten Lore of Eclipses. Also joining us will be Connecticut Treasurer, although he's not here here in Connecticut right now for reasons you'll find out about. Ryan Hanrahan, First Alert meteorologist at NBC Connecticut. But John, we're going to start with you. Welcome to the conversation. And maybe you can just begin. I mean, I think everybody's sort of at least dimly aware that something's happening on Monday. You're in Portland, Oregon, on part of that 70-mile wide path of totality. Maybe you could begin by telling us what a path of totality is.
Well, of course. First, an eclipse is this remarkable cosmic coincidence. It's when the sun, the moon, and the earth precisely line up in the sky so that the moon moves over the sun and completely blocks out the light. And because of the geometry here, the shadow of the moon will only be, during this eclipse, about 70 miles wide. So if you want to see totality, you have to be in that very narrow band.
And that here on the East Coast, that is going to be, it's actually when our show is on the air live on Monday. It's between 1 and 2, right?
Yes. Yes, it starts, it takes about an hour and 40 minutes for the shadow to cross the country. I think it begins in Oregon at about 10:30 local time and probably ends in South Carolina, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay, we may be getting a little South Carolina report in just a second here, but maybe you can just say about some of the other things that happen during a solar eclipse in that path of totality. I'm just wondering about. Let's just start with animals. Animals aren't used to having it go really dark all of a sudden. Do they react in any particular way?
Oh yes, I mean the main thing that people will notice about animals are the birds. The birds will stop singing and they'll head back to the nest. The crickets will start chirping. People have reported that ants just stop in their track. And then after the eclipse is over, the ants go back to work. People have observed everything from behavior in cats and dogs. I've always find it curious that fish seem to respond. Of course, the way that they respond is nighttime. And I've always thought it was curious that no one has ever seen a goldfish react. So I would put that out there. Look at your aquarium at home and see if there's any reaction.
I mean, I'm not sure I would know whether it was a goldfish or a fish in the wild, how to gauge that a fish. Like, I don't know what fish do at night, but you're saying whatever it is they do at night, they'll do it during the eclipse?
Well, yeah. Well, at night, fish usually go to a particular area and stay there. And then when the light comes back, they go out and they start feeding again.
Now, there's a whole bunch of things that I just hadn't really thought about because I've never been through one of these things before. So the sun provides a lot of heat. I guess we're going to not be getting some of that heat for a while. So what happens then? How much does the temperature drop?
Well, on a typical total solar eclipse, it'll only drop anywhere from 2 to 3 degrees, but there are some which have been recorded for over 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And so it does get cold. You're almost certain to feel that. But most people say, what's the big deal? It's just going to get dark. And I tell people it's not the visual, it's the whole sensory experience, because there's all kinds of things that happen, and they're only happen during total solar eclipses, and they're going on all around you very, very, very quickly.
Yeah, I think what I'm beginning to have sink in with me is that it's not that it's going to get darker. It's going to be like, at least in the path of totality, it's going to be night. So everything that we associate with night will be happening. I assume you'll be able to see stars in the sky if the sky is clear?
Oh, yes. You'll see stars and planets. The planet Venus is going to be very bright. This eclipse is happening in the constellation Leo, and there's a bright star right there. It'll be very close to the sun. But during this two minutes, there's a whole variety of things. When you look at people start looking very strange to you. Their faces are distorted, and there's something called the eclipse wind and so forth.
Wait a minute, the eclipse wind. What would that be?
If I can step you through
Yeah.
sort of what happens
Sure.
very quickly.
Yep.
So let's start about 2 minutes before totality. And on a normal day, there's a disk up there, the disk of the sun. But because 2 minutes to totality, there's just this very thin line, a crescent. And so the shadows are very sharp. And amazingly, when you look at something, especially someone who you're very familiar with, their face looks distorted. It looks like a hallucination. The eyes are very deeply set in the face. The nose and mouth and chin are protruding. And then at about 1 minute, you'll see these bands of light and dark, and they'll flutter past you. They'll be moving faster than a person can run. Those are the shadow bands, and those occur again because the source of light is just a very thin line, and it's variations in the atmosphere. And then about 30 seconds before totality, there will be this cold gust of wind come by. That's appropriately known as the eclipse wind. And that's because out in the sunlight portion, it's warm, and in the moon shadow, it's cold. And because of that difference, there is this gust of wind that blows by, and then it starts getting cold.
Wow.
And among the eerie things that happen, if you look around 360 degrees, some 10, 20, 40 miles away, it's bright sunlight. But you're in the darkness of night, and you look up at the sky, and it will have the general appearance of night. I mean, it'll be a very dark blue. The night sky really is not black. If you look at the eclipse sun, the silhouette of the moon, that is coal black. The sky around it will be a dark blue like night, and you might see patches of purple, green, and yellow. And as you mentioned, stars will come out, planets will come out, but the big event is the corona, this pearly white halo that comes out and can only be seen during a total solar eclipse. And it comes out like sheets and streaks, and it has thin lines to it. And then if you look around the silhouette of the moon, you'll see one or more blood red dots. These are big packets of gas that the sun has just blown off. And as you look at these, every single one of them is several times the size of the planet Earth.
Wow.
And then after the eclipse, this all reverses. I mean, the wind blows by, the shadow bands flutter by, and eventually all your friends start to look normal again.
Well, you don't know my friends. All right, so now I'm feeling like I should be in that path of totality. I'm going to miss something. I should have gone to South Carolina. Ryan Hanrahan did. He's first alert meteorologist at NBC Connecticut. And so, Ryan, are you in South Carolina right now?
Not yet. Flying down Saturday morning. So I'll be there for the eclipse on Monday.
All right. Well, you're going to be there when we need you here. We're going to be up here panicking. What's going to happen in Connecticut? We won't have a path of totality. What will we have?
Yeah, so we'll get about 2/3 of the sun will be obscured by the moon. So we'll get a partial solar eclipse here. But, even with the partial eclipse, as long as you have the right glasses, the special protective glasses, you can still see the moon sort of going right in front of the sun Monday afternoon. It starts around 1 o'clock, and the peak is about 2:45 in the afternoon. So about 2/3 of the sun will be covered up. So it's still pretty cool to see. It hasn't happened here since Christmas Day 2000. That was the last time we had a partial solar eclipse.
I know just because we're both on Twitter that you've been getting reports about who has those glasses. Oh, I have to say one thing, or I'll get in a lot of trouble. Don't assume that your local library has those kinds of special protective glasses that they can lend you. Librarians are apparently being besieged by requests for these glasses, and for the most part, they don't have them. They can't help you. Don't bother your librarians. If they don't have them. But I mean, I noticed you on Twitter. There's been a run on these things, right? You have to know where to get them.
Yeah, I called a couple days ago. I called pretty much everyone I could think of: Lowe's, Home Depot, Walmart. Everyone was sold out. The only place I found them was the 7-Eleven on Park in Hartford. They had a box right at the counter there, and I snagged a few. but they're hard to get. So, a few libraries are having viewing parties, and you may get lucky there, but we know that a lot of people have been waiting a long time to get these classes, and it looks like you're probably out of luck for Monday if you don't have them already.
An eclipse is not exactly weather, although, as John just explained, there may be things that happen that feel like weather. Will it affect the weather? I mean, does all that stuff that's happening, does it actually affect weather?
Oh, yeah, it absolutely does. One of the things that's sort of interesting is all of our computer models, which we use to forecast the weather, don't know eclipses are happening. So all of our computer models just are predicting a normal, typical day without a solar eclipse. So we sort of have to go in and manually edit the forecast afterwards to take into account the eclipse. Back in 1994, we had a partial solar eclipse here. About 85% of the sun was covered. It was in May of 94. And the temperature actually dropped in some parts of the state as much as 6 or 7 degrees. Bob Hart, a meteorologist who was living in North Branford at the time, measured a 7-degree temperature drop in the middle of the afternoon. So even outside of the path of totality, you'll notice sort of an unusual, mid-afternoon temperature drop as the partial solar eclipse moves in. It won't seem dark to you if you're outside. It won't seem like it's dark heading toward night, but there will be a bit of a subtle temperature drop in the afternoon.
So since it's the afternoon, we kind of don't want it to be cloudy, either here in Connecticut or in your case down in South Carolina. How's that looking right now?
So right now it looks great up here. Should be mostly sunny, should be great afternoon on Monday. And it's going to be hot, probably near 90 degrees, but a little cooler during the peak of the eclipse. Down in South Carolina, it's a little iffy right now. Looks like there will be some clouds, which is pretty typical for the South in the afternoon. One thing that may actually be a saving grace for people in the path of totality in South Carolina and Tennessee is that as the temperature drops, so, as the moon goes in front of the sun, you're getting less and less solar radiation. So you start to cool the Earth, just like you would at sunset or heading into night. So as the Earth starts to cool and the atmosphere starts to cool, sometimes you can actually start dissipating the typical clouds that bubble up in the afternoon. If you're in Florida, how many times in the afternoon do all these clouds blow up and you get a few, showers and thunderstorms late afternoon and early evening? But now, since the temperature is actually dropping in the middle of the afternoon, sometimes those clouds can actually go away. So you may have a better chance of actually seeing the solar eclipse on a day that may have otherwise been sort of cloudy because you're getting this really unusual mid-afternoon temperature drop. So I've got my fingers crossed for that. I'm hoping we'll get the clouds out of the way.
Well, Ryan Hanrahan, great to talk to you. I feel a little insecure that you're not going to be here where we need you on Monday, but we've still got Bob Maxon, right? Bob will be here?
Yes, Bob will be fine. Bob's got the solar eclipse glasses. I bought a bunch for the station, so I'm sure he'll be looking at it. And I'll be on Twitter and Facebook geeking out the whole time, I'm sure, so I won't be too far.
I was at a Highland Park Market in Farmington last night, and one of the baggers was talking about the fact that Bob had been there and this guy had waited on him. You would have thought Elvis was shopping there or something. It's like
it's pretty much like Elvis and then Bob. That's sort of the,
that's right.
The rank there.
Exactly. That's the ranking. All right. Ryan Hanrahan, great to talk to you. Enjoy South Carolina. Be safe. We're back with John Dvorak, geophysicist, astronomer, and author of Mask of the Sun, The Science, History, and Forgotten Lore of Eclipses. So, John, so I'm 62 years old. I feel like I've heard about a lot of eclipse-y kinds of things over the course of my life. Let's say I live to 70. How many eclipses of various types and various intensities would I typically probably live through?
Well, if you don't make any effort to see a total solar eclipse, during your lifetime you have about a 20% chance that one just happens. But throughout your life, you would probably, without searching them out, without traveling to the ends of the earth to look at them, you would probably see something like 40 eclipses of the moon, and probably about 30 partial solar eclipses.
So that's
it's only that very small percentage for an actual total solar eclipse.
Right. There's also, of course, the total eclipse of the heart. But the defining characteristic of that is there's nothing you can do. So
well, that's right.
Nothing there really.
And I've had my heart broken many times.
Yeah, nothing you can do. I mean, with these other eclipses either, really, when you get down to it. So historically, eclipses have been tools for even record keeping, right? I mean, one way I suppose you can kind of define time in the early stages of measurement is how often there's an eclipse.
Oh yes. Archaeologists have always had these very long lists of, say, of kings, and they know the first king, the second king. They knew how many years that they reigned, but they didn't have an absolute year to any of this. And the way, if you look at the textbook in grade school, they have all those dates, all those absolute dates. Those are because occasionally in ancient history, because it's such a striking phenomenon, people write down there was a total solar eclipse today, and I was standing in Athens, or I was standing in Babylon, or such. And those are known as anchor points. And so with those anchor points, we can take these long lists of kings in Babylon or Egypt or China, and we can put down absolute dates. So if you want to know how we know what year Julius Caesar was born, or there was a battle with Alexander the Great, it's because of eclipses, timing of eclipses.
You write that one of the great achievements in eclipse prediction came with the invention of the, I may not even say this, the Antikythera mechanism. Tell us what that is.
Oh, yes, the Antikythera mechanism. That was a big shock. This was uncovered on the floor of the Mediterranean in Greece in 1903, and nobody really knew what it was for some 90 years. But because of technology in terms of X-ray imaging and such, this is a handheld device. It dates back to the 2nd century BC, and it was in essence a computer. And you could follow and predict the motion of the planets, the sun and the moon, and it had a special dial on it for the prediction of eclipses. And there are many remarkable things about this. We certainly know that we did not know that the ancient Greeks had this type of technology to build this. And we also know that there's nothing in the technology of the world for almost 1,500 years which even match it.
That's amazing.
It's really an amazing device.
This was found by sponge divers, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
They were off the island of Antikythera, and there was a storm in the Mediterranean, so they went over to the island, and as the storm passed, they decided to dive down and search for sponges, and they came upon what they thought was a forest of bodies down there. It turned out these were bronze sculptures, and this was a shipwreck. And they pulled up all this stuff, pottery, sculpture, coins, and they pulled up this thing, this metallic thing made out of brass, and that is the mechanism.
I'm glad I'm not the only person who has trouble saying it. So I mean, we're going to end the first segment on that note that amazingly, the ancient Greeks were able to come up with this incredibly sophisticated for its time mechanism, which wasn't really copied or rivaled or anything like that for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years afterwards. It really is one of the ways in which we can look at eclipses and time measurement as some things that have really tested the scientific abilities of people in different ages. But eclipses have been used in other ways as kind of dark omens. Why don't we take a little break? We'll come back. We can talk about that.
Where did the sun go? Where did the sun go?
And we're back. We're talking about eclipses, getting ready for the Monday eclipse. Helping us get ready is John Dvorak, a geophysicist, astronomer, and author of Mask of the Sun, The Science, History, and Forgotten Lore of Eclipses. In a little while, we'll also talk to somebody who still uses eclipses as part of sort of a predictive theory, by which I mean we're going to talk to Wade Caves, San Francisco-based astrological consultant, speaker, and educator. But John, if we go back to the very first recorded eclipse, which the first time that anybody made a record of an eclipse that kind of pinned it to a particular date, that's back in ancient, really ancient Syria, I think 1375 before the Common Era. So, and even then, it seemed as though whoever was writing this down, whoever was making a record of this, thought that the eclipse portended something bad, right?
Oh, yes. Almost every culture has that. An eclipse is a bad omen. And it's easy to understand this. The sun is our major source of light and heat. And within seconds, it just goes out and there's a black spot up there. And it's very unnerving to see one.
Right. You wouldn't naturally think, something good is about to happen. So anyway, in this city, which I think was called Ugarit, somebody wrote down the overlord will be attacked by his vassals. That was, who knows why that particular idea occurred to that particular person. But since then, there has been this notion, and particularly as eclipses got to be a little bit easier to predict, as you can start to see them coming, that maybe they meant something bad was going to happen. So you write about Pope Urban VIII in 1626. I'll let you pick up the story there in 1626, John.
Right. In 1626, in the church, there was this constant schism between the Italians and the Spanish. And the Spanish astrologers who were living in Rome, they looked at the stars, position of the sun and the moon, and eclipses coming up, and they say the Pope is going to die soon. And Pope Urban VIII had his own set of astrologers. He had them check it, and they told him that's right. But Urban VIII knew that there was a way out of this. If he performed the right ritual, the right magic, that might protect him from death. And he also knew that in the Inquisition, there was a magician. He had been there for 27 years in the dungeons of the Inquisition, and Urban VIII had him released and brought to Rome, and the two men went inside the Vatican in a room by themselves, and the ritual was performed, and the eclipse happened. Urban VIII lived, and he then went out and he had the Spanish cardinals arrested, put in the Inquisition. They were put in the dungeons. They were put on trial. But before the trials were over, these people mysteriously died of poisoning. But he did something that has influenced the history of the church. In 1631, he issued an order, a bull, and it said every member of the Catholic Church, every official of the Catholic Church, you may not participate in magic, sorcery, or astrology from this point forward. And this has echoes today.
Right. No, well, I want to get to the echoes today. It should also be mentioned that Pope Urban also disbanded his manufacturing council, just to be on the safe side as well. I just want to see the other thing that, one of the many other things that the common folk seem to kind of think about during eclipses is whether they had something to do with the coming outbreak of disease or plague or influenza epidemics, right? For some reason or other, those two things are tied together, John?
Oh, yes. There's this very common thing throughout cultures that what happens up there in the sky influences what happens here on Earth. A very specific example, the occurrence of syphilis in Europe first appears in 1495. And it was an outbreak. It expanded across Europe, and people obviously wanted to say, what is the source of this? And some years before, there were two events that happened in the sky. There was what is known as a grand conjunction, that is, Saturn and Jupiter came very close together in the constellation Scorpio. And Scorpio, every sign of the zodiac relates to the human body. And Scorpio is the sign of the genitals. And so it was reasoned syphilis affects the genitals. That was the origin of it. And then a year or so later, there was a total solar eclipse across Europe. And it was reasoned That is what released the power of the grand conjunction. And that was the origin of the disease.
We have these interpreters for American Sign Language here. I didn't even want to look over at them when we were having Scorpio be the sign of the genitals. I don't know how that works out in ASL, but Godspeed to them, I say. Well, I mean, so we have that kind of connection. We have those kinds of ideas being very prevalent among the people, and those ideas don't totally go away. They never totally go away. It's maybe a nice segue into a quick conversation here with Wayne Caves, a San Francisco-based astrological consultant, speaker, and educator. And I would imagine a man very much in demand in these eclipse-ridden times. Wade, welcome to the conversation.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So, from your point of view, is this eclipse a meaningful event? Is this likely to have anything to do with anything happening here on Earth?
Well, it's a great question. I think that what we'll need to do is separate out this eclipse from eclipses generally. Eclipses, if you take a look right through the astrological tradition, what we're told is that eclipses are expected to have effects on those parts of the Earth from which the eclipse is visible. So it's not that every eclipse is going to have an effect. It's not that everything that is out there astrologically is going to connect with every individual person. What we have to think of is ways that these astrological symbols that are presented to us in the sky connect with individuals here on the ground. Now, as it happens, this upcoming eclipse crosses the North American continent. As was said earlier, it goes from the northwest of the United States, starting in Oregon, going straight through to South Carolina, sweeping very close to our nation's capital in D.C. So a lot of astrologers, now and many previous, a few years prior, have been talking about how this eclipse is expected to have some effects on the U.S., on the office of the presidency, governing bodies, for a multitude of reasons, which we can get into. But I would say, yes, this eclipse, particularly for citizens of the United States, because that's where the path to totality lies, and also particularly for those individuals within the United States who were, currently live or were born near the path of totality, and also have, planetary configurations from their birth chart. And when I say that, just to clarify for listeners who might be new to this, at the moment that you're born, the planets and the sky were in certain configuration. There was a certain star rising on the eastern horizon, setting on the western horizon. The planets were configured in particular format, and that's kind of like the signature in which all of us were born. You have this kind of signature, this symbolic picture in which we step into the world. And so in a way, there's this kind of connection between the symbolic moment and our own lives. So when this eclipse comes, and Mr. Dvorak did mention that it's in Leo, and that is the case if you use I think it is the case anyway, but 28 degrees Leo is the degree of the eclipse. So anybody who's got, hard aspects or hard configurations to 28 Leo, I would anticipate also would feel the effects of this eclipse.
First of all, I want to make an announcement. That has nothing to do with what we were just talking about right now. But when Ryan Hanrahan was on, he mentioned this 7-Eleven in Hartford that had quite some time ago, days ago, those special glasses for viewing the eclipse. It doesn't have any of those glasses anymore. Don't go to that 7-Eleven. Apparently, a lot of people just did that, and so don't do that. It's nice to know you're listening to the show, and also don't bother your local librarians either. There are eclipse viewing parties at places like Wesleyan, and I think UConn is having one somewhere too. But all right, yeah, you can go to the 7-Eleven and get a Slurpee, but don't ask them for glasses. They don't have those. So, wait, I want to back you up. You did say something about Washington, D.C. presidency.
Right.
These are, complicated times even without a big scary eclipse. What is it actually that you're referring to there?
Well, okay, so let me clarify. I think by and large, the astrological community would not say that the planets and stars actually cause anything. What we're looking at is kind of a symbolic picture of what's coming to a head. So, yes, right now we are in the midst of something that's, quite palpable, quite tense. There's a lot of difficulty and frustration surrounding the nation right now from all sides. There is just a lot of tension. And, with this eclipse, I mean, I think there's a couple ways you can look at it. You can look at it and say that this eclipse is one more thing on the pile. But what I would say, and the approach I would advocate for, is saying the eclipse is actually, kind of heralding what's already in the works. This is that moment where everything reaches a tipping point. And to clarify, too, eclipses, I think, for folks who aren't really deeply entrenched in the astrological tradition, the expectation they have very often is that the day of the eclipse, or plus or minus one day, that's when the effect should happen. But the reality is, if you read through the astrological text, the timing mechanisms we have correspond to the length of the duration at totality. So, this eclipse at totality, when centered on Washington, D.C., if my numbers are right, it's somewhere around 2 minutes, 44 seconds. So what we're looking at is the effects of the eclipse, kind of really starting to take about 2 years and 2/3 of a year to really start to manifest and show themselves. So there's actually quite a long window with eclipses. And that timing mechanism I just shared is for solar eclipses. For lunar eclipses, you take that time scale of years and turn it down to months. So at any rate, to respond to your question, really, I mean, it depends on your approach. I mean, the position I advocate for is that, astrological meetings, significations don't cause anything. They actually just reflect the reality of what's happening.
So, John Dvorak, there are some similarities or some common cause made between astrologers and scientists, each of them looking for patterns, looking for recognizable patterns, chronological intervals that can be predictive. So, John Dvorak, one of the things that we're really talking about here is the so-called Saros cycle. I mentioned Edmund Halley earlier in the show. The Saros cycle is one of his inventions. Or it's not an invention, it's a discovery, I guess. John Dvorak, tell us what the Saros cycle is.
Well, the Saros cycle lasts for 18 years and 10 days. As the Earth goes around the sun and the moon goes around the Earth, every 18 years and 10 days, the position of the sun and the moon almost exactly repeats itself. And so if you have an eclipse, then 18 years and 10 days later, you'll have almost an exact repeat of that eclipse. The only difference is it's 18 years, 10 days, and 8 hours. So everything gets shifted about 120 degrees. And so if you ask for this eclipse, this one, let's go back 18 years, 10 days, and 8 hours. And the previous total solar eclipse of this Saros cycle happened over Europe in early August 1999. And the next one is going to happen in 2035 over China and Japan.
So we've got those cycles, and obviously Wade, an astrologer, will be interested in cycles. And so they do seem to coincide with some fairly big political events, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you take a look at, that Saros cycle, which, that word, Saros, has an interesting history in its own right and appears to originate with the Chaldeans. So I think it's an interesting thing to study Saros cycles anyway. But, when we take a look, I'll just look at the last 4 eclipses in the Saros cycle. So, 1999, that was visible from Washington, D.C., and we were right in the midst of the Clinton impeachment at that time. In 1981, it wasn't visible from D.C., and we had the attempted assassination of Reagan. So, again, I just want to kind of mark the distinction between visible and non-visible eclipses from the nation's capital. In 1963, we did have a visible D.C. Eclipse, and we had the assassination of JFK. And then in 1945, the eclipse again was visible from D.C. We had the death of FDR just prior, and then the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the same month. So when you take a look at this Saros cycle, repeatedly what we see is continued focus on the United States. A large part of this is because the eclipses in this Saros cycle do tend to be visible from the United States. But in particular, the leaders. And the reason for this astrologically is because the sun is what's getting eclipsed here in this total solar eclipse. And the sun, when the sun comes out, everything else goes away. The stars go away. Sometimes the moon even goes away. The dark, deep tone of space, that deep blue that we were talking about earlier goes away. So, we have this connection between the sun and leaders and people who command that kind of presence when they enter the stage. So when the sun gets eclipsed, what we automatically have is a reason to suspect there's some kind of toppling of world powers or leaders or whoever's on the stage. But especially when this happens in Leo, and Leo is the sign that is ruled by the sun. So we've got this double whammy of picking up on leader symbolism. And so there's a lot of astrologers right now who are looking to a particular individual in the United States, our President Donald Trump, who actually, when he was born, 29 degrees Leo was rising on the horizon. So this eclipse is happening at the most personal point of his own birth chart. Which really draws him very strongly into signification.
All right. None of that makes me feel especially good, but Wade Caves, thank you so much. And I promise not to tell Pope Urban that you said any of that stuff. John Dvorak, as we end this segment, I just want to ask you, I mean, this is something that you have devoted a substantial portion of your life to studying and writing one of the really definitive and very helpful books about this. So what are you going to do on Monday? Like, how are you going to spend Monday?
Well, I plan to spend it in Eastern Oregon. And the reason I chose Eastern Oregon is I looked at the probability maps for clouds. And there's essentially a 50% or better across almost the entire country. But Eastern Oregon, Central Wyoming, and Western Nebraska have about a 92% chance of a clear sky. And that's the reason I'm heading there.
All right. Well, enjoy, if that's the right word. And thank you so much for your help on this show. I think we understand this phenomenon a lot better and have kind of maybe even a better sense of what the day will be like. We are going to take a break. When we come back, it would be an ill wind, an ill eclipse wind indeed, that didn't blow some money towards somebody. And in fact, this eclipse is being monetized to a fare thee well. We'll have an editor and writer for Fast Company to tell us about that.
I'd like to begin by thanking the Lizard Kings and the giant moth people who will emerge from the ground on Monday to rule us for 1,000 years. I want to get on their good side now. The people behind today's show and our Radio for the Deaf simulcast are producer Josh Nalea, me, Kyone Wolf, Tucker Ives, Heather Brandon, Katie Tolarski, Sir Ray Hardman appeared in the intro, and special thanks to our interpreters from Source Interpreting of West Hartford, Connecticut, Sarah D'Agostino and Mary Sue Owens. You can find the ASL interpretation of this show on the Colin McEnroe Show Facebook page. Part of Bill Curry was played by a giant moth person. On tomorrow's Nose, have smartphones killed the souls of a generation? And now, back to Colin.
So, as we keep saying, there have been lots of eclipses, but I think we're living in an age right now that's so heavily networked that people can find out about it, can find out about special opportunities connected to it, can market those opportunities in a very fast and pervasive way. So here to talk about that is Jessica Lieber, staff editor and writer for Fast Company, former business reporter for MIT's Technology Review, wrote about this for Fast Company. So, Jessica, first of all, welcome to the conversation.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Tell us about Hopkinsville, Kentucky. I think this is a pretty good case study.
So Hopkinsville is on the path of totality for the eclipse. It's also the point of greatest eclipse, which is where the moon and the sun and the earth line up the best. So the town realized this almost 10 years ago when it started getting some phone calls from real eclipse enthusiasts, and decided that it wanted to promote itself to make the most of the opportunity that was coming to it. So they started planning 2 years ago, and they even hired a marketing coordinator who started her work a few months ago. And they're expecting up to 100,000 people, and this is for a town of about 30,000. So it's going to be pretty crazy there.
Right. And so basically, if you can monetize it, you do. And everybody in this town basically is essentially selling space.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, as far as I understand, all the hotels are booked. They're expecting major traffic jams. There's going to be like all sorts of private businesses like distilleries and campgrounds selling like RV and tent sites. One, I believe, for almost $400 for 2 nights, which is crazy because a tent site usually costs like $20-$30 for a night. So yeah, they're going to be doing really well.
So working in public radio, I'm just swimming in money. I've got about $80,000 I could plunk down on a really peak Eclipse experience. What can you get me for that?
Yeah, so if you have $80,000 to spend, there is a private helicopter tour company that I found in Oregon, which is one of the most popular places, who will take you and 6 of your friends up to a mountain that is normally not accessible to the public because it is owned by the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. And they've gotten a special permit to take you up there for what they're calling the most exclusive Eclipse party.
So I think one of the big differences between now and, say, 1999 is how networked we are and the fact that people have gotten very good at using certain kinds of platforms essentially to sell space for short periods of time. Airbnb defines this phenomenon. So I'm assuming people on Airbnb are just, once again, doing the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, if you have the path of totality does not go through major cities for the most part. I think Nashville, Tennessee is the biggest. So it's a lot of rural areas. So if you happen to be living there, have a property there, like housing is at high demand. So, we've seen someone in Oregon got someone to pay $2,000 a night for the night before the eclipse. And you see that's on the high end, but you see, people renting their homes for much higher than their value.
Right. And sometimes you're not getting a home or a bedroom, right? Sometimes you're getting like a cot in a garage.
Yeah. I mean, if you have any space at all, people are just charging as much as they possibly can for it. There are threads on Airbnb message boards talking about strategy even over how much they could get away with charging. Which makes sense. You might want to, you want to make money. This isn't going to happen again in these places.
Right. So, and one thing I'm noticing, and I'm sure you have a better sense of this, is basically this is working. I mean, David Platz from Atlas Obscura invited us to come do our coverage from the Atlas Obscura celebration, which is the sort of the scientific, it's the nerd one, basically.
Yeah.
But I just checked today. That's sold out, right? I mean, people really, it's not just an opportunity that people are offering. It's an opportunity that people are seizing.
Yeah, I mean, I am in New York, so I am very far from the eclipse, and I feel I'm not going to go, and I feel like I'm missing out. And I think all the coverage around that has really made a lot of people feel that. So a lot of people want to, get these last-minute tickets and are willing to shell out because they feel like they're going to miss this really amazing experience, which, everyone who's ever seen a total eclipse says it will be. So yeah.
Yeah. So it's actually, we could even call it EFOMO, eclipse fear of missing out, right? You're experiencing that right now.
I saw a Facebook group that started in 2010. It was an invite for the eclipse. So there are people who have been planning for this for a long time.
All right. Well, there'll be another one. So get ready. Prepare yourself. You're young. We have to stop now. I mean, we could keep going. There's an awful lot to talk about here, but we're going to stop now. Thanks to Josh Nalea for making this whole thing happen. That was Jessica Lieber from Fast Company. And you should read her article because there's stuff that we couldn't even go into. There's like, if you're a minor league baseball fan or if you're, whatever it is, there's a specialty event for you and it's too late. You can't get into it anyway. Thanks once again to our wonderful interpreters, our ASL interpreters. Sarah D'Agostino had the job of trying to translate all that astrology information that was coming at her very fast. Mary Sue Owens has the unenviable job of trying to translate me. I can't even translate me. Thanks to everybody else. We'll be back tomorrow with the nose.
When there's no more sunshine, you better learn to sing the blues. When there's no more sunshine, you better learn to sing the blues.
As a scientist, I gotta tell you, the Earth, it's round.
Unbelievable. It's flat. Scientists lie.
And vaccinations don't cause autism.
Nope. I know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy who can prove it.
There's a solar eclipse happening on August 21st.
I know. I just got my solar viewing glasses in tortoiseshell.